The night was alive with city lights, laughter, and the aroma of fine dining drifting through the streets. It was one of those evenings when the city felt like it was performing for its people, cars gliding past with headlights like fireflies, music spilling from bars on the corner, and the chatter of families, couples, and friends echoing against the brick walls. Restaurants lined the avenue like shining jewels, each one glowing with warm yellow light, promising flavors and memories within. But among them all, one stood out, Reynolds' Fine Dining, a place spoken of with admiration and even awe. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was an experience. People said eating there felt like stepping into another world, one where elegance and flavor collided. For many, dining here was a dream, the kind of evening that came only on birthdays, anniversaries, or once-in-a-lifetime occasions. Inside, the atmosphere was equally enchanting. The clink of silverware and crystal glasses mixed with soft piano music that floated gently through the air. Waiters in black suits moved with precision, balancing trays like dancers on a stage, every step rehearsed and graceful. The aroma of seared steak, garlic butter, and freshly baked bread swirled through the air, wrapping itself around guests the moment they entered. At the entrance, beneath a glowing chandelier, stood a young hostess. She was positioned at a sleek podium, a computer screen glowing faintly in front of her. Her blouse was spotless, her hair neatly tied back, and her smile was the kind you'd expect to see at a luxury establishment, polished, rehearsed, professional. And yet, behind that practiced smile was a stiffness, a sense of someone performing a role rather than embracing it. She greeted some guests with warmth, offering a cheerful, welcome, good evening, but to others, her smile faltered, her tone flattened, and her eyes revealed impatience. It was at this moment that James and Aaliyah arrived. The doors swung open, letting in a rush of cool evening air, and there they were, a couple whose presence seemed to light up the room. James wore his best navy blazer, the fabric crisp, his shoes shining under the chandelier. His arm was linked with Aaliyah's, who looked radiant in an emerald green dress that flowed to her ankles, the color bringing out the warmth in her skin and the sparkle in her eyes. They weren't celebrities, but they carried themselves with the quiet dignity of two people deeply in love, two people who had weathered storms together and still chosen joy. This night meant everything to them. It wasn't just another dinner, it was their 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years of laughter, struggles, sacrifices, and triumphs. 5 years of building a life together, of dreaming big even when money was tight, of promising each other that no matter what the world threw at them, they would rise hand in hand. James had been saving for weeks, cutting back on lunches at work, skipping his usual coffee runs, all so he could afford to treat Aaliyah to this moment. And Aaliyah, who had spent hours choosing her dress and carefully curling her hair, felt like a queen just to be here. To them, Reynolds' Fine Dining wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol, a reward for their journey, proof that their love was worth celebrating in the grandest way. But as they stepped up to the podium, expecting to be welcomed like any other guests, the air shifted. The hostess's eyes landed on them, and something in her expression changed. The polished smile she had offered others disappeared instantly. Her lips tightened, her posture stiffened, and her gaze turned cold. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but to James and Aaliyah, the difference was unmistakable. Instead of warmth, there was dismissal. Instead of welcome, there was rejection. James, still hopeful, leaned in slightly. "Good evening," he said kindly. "We have a reservation under Williams. 7:30. He spoke with the quiet confidence of someone certain everything was in order, someone who believed in fairness. But the hostess didn't even try to look properly at the computer screen. Her fingers tapped lazily on the keyboard, her eyes barely glancing down, before she looked up again with a clipped, disinterested tone. "Sorry, we're fully booked," she said quickly, her words falling like cold rain. James blinked in surprise. "Fully booked?" He glanced over her shoulder, his eyes catching the unmistakable sight of not one, but two empty tables, each perfectly set, each waiting for guests who hadn't yet arrived. The sight struck him immediately as wrong. Still, he kept his voice polite, calm, steady. "Are you sure? We booked weeks ago." But the hostess's face didn't soften. If anything, her expression grew more rigid, her eyes narrowing slightly as though she had already decided how this exchange would end. She repeated herself, her tone sharper this time, leaving no room for warmth. "There's no table available." Behind her, the glow of the empty tables seemed almost to mock James and Aaliyah. 2 chairs, waiting. 2 candles, unlit. 2 places that could have held them, honoring their love. But the truth was clear, she had no intention of letting them sit there. Aaliyah felt her heart sink. She squeezed James's hand, her excitement beginning to dim under the weight of humiliation. This was supposed to be their night. This was supposed to be magical. But instead of a memory of joy, it was already becoming a memory of rejection. And in that moment, the celebration they had dreamed of for weeks began to unravel, not because there was no table, but because someone had decided they didn't belong. James tried to stay calm, though inside his chest his heart was pounding. He had been looking forward to this night for weeks, and he didn't want anything, especially not this, to ruin it. With a polite smile that masked his frustration, he repeated himself, hoping the hostess would correct her mistake. "We have a reservation under Williams, 7:30, he said, enunciating clearly, as though his calmness might somehow soften her stance. For a moment, he waited, expecting her to glance again at the computer screen and say, "Ah, yes, my mistake, please follow me." But she didn't. The hostess barely touched the keys again, her fingers making a few empty taps more for show than for effort. Her eyes didn't even focus on the list before her. She lifted her chin, arms crossing as if to block any further discussion. "No reservation under that name," she said coldly, dismissing his words as though they were unworthy of consideration. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Flat. Sharp. Final. Aaliyah, who had been quietly hopeful beside her husband, stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm certain the booking was made. Could you please double-check? Maybe it's under another spelling. We made it weeks ago." Her eyes flickered past the hostess to the 2 open tables waiting nearby. One was set near the window, with a candle standing tall in the middle, its flame yet to be lit. Another was closer to the center of the dining room, plates and glasses arranged perfectly, untouched. The sight was almost cruel. How could someone say the restaurant was full when the truth sat right there, gleaming under the soft light? But the hostess didn't follow Aaliyah's gaze. She didn't bother with another search. Her lips curled into a faint smirk, and her voice grew sharper. "I already told you. There's no reservation here. And there's no table for you. Maybe you should try somewhere else tonight." The sting of those words pierced the air. Around them, the couple waiting behind James and Aaliyah shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. They knew what they were seeing wasn't right, but none of them spoke up. Silence blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that said, "We see what's happening, but we'd rather not get involved." James's jaw tightened. His fists clenched slightly at his sides, though he forced them to relax before anyone could notice. He had promised himself that tonight would be about love, not conflict. He had promised Aaliyah joy, not tension. But the fire in his chest was growing hotter with every word the hostess spoke. He had never asked for special treatment, only fairness. Yet here he was, standing in front of 2 empty tables, being told there was no place for him. "I don't understand," James said softly, his voice calm but laced with quiet pain. "We came here to celebrate something important. Why are we being treated like this?" A hush fell over the space. Even the sound of cutlery clinking against plates seemed to pause. Aaliyah's hand tightened around his, and he could feel the tremble in her grip. Her smile, the one she had carried into the restaurant with such excitement, had all but vanished. The magic she had hoped for was slipping away before her eyes. The hostess, unmoved, shrugged. The gesture was casual, almost mocking. Her next words were like daggers. "Like I said, try another restaurant. This place isn't for everyone." The cruelty was in the simplicity. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just a wall of rejection built out of arrogance and prejudice. She had made up her mind the moment they walked through the door. Her words weren't just about the reservation. They were about belonging. Or rather, her belief that James and Aaliyah didn't. The silence in the lobby grew heavier. Guests standing nearby lowered their eyes, suddenly fascinated by the floor tiles or the glow of their phone screens. A waiter walked past quickly, his steps a little too fast, his eyes avoiding the podium. Everyone saw. Everyone knew. Yet no one spoke. The truth hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. James and Aaliyah were not being turned away because of a missing reservation, they were being turned away because of who they were. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten, her breath unsteady. This was supposed to be their night. The dress she had chosen so carefully, the excitement that had carried her all week, the anticipation of clinking glasses and sharing dessert, it was all unraveling in front of her. She blinked back tears, unwilling to let the hostess see her cry, unwilling to give her that satisfaction. James, standing tall beside her, could feel the heat of humiliation crawling up his neck. His love for Aaliyah fueled his restraint. He would not raise his voice. He would not cause a scene. But inside, he was burning. He thought of the hours he had worked, the corners he had cut, the sacrifices he had made just to bring her here. And now, on what was supposed to be the happiest night of their year, they were being denied not just a table, but their dignity. The words, "This place isn't for everyone," echoed in his mind like a taunt, each repetition harder to swallow than the last. He wanted to fight back. He wanted to demand justice right there, in front of everyone. But he also wanted to protect Aaliyah. He glanced at her, saw the sadness in her eyes, and whispered softly, "Let's go, baby." It was a whisper filled with love, but also with heartbreak. A whisper that said, "I won't let them hurt you anymore." He squeezed her hand gently, ready to turn away, ready to carry his wife out of that place, even though his soul screamed against it. And as they turned toward the door, their dream of a perfect night slipping away, something unexpected happened, something that would change the entire evening. James and Aaliyah took their first step toward the door, the weight of the evening pressing down heavier than any winter coat. The air felt colder now, even though the restaurant was warm. Their anniversary, the night they had both longed for, was unraveling with every second. Guests continued dining, the clinking of forks against plates resuming, though slower, almost guilty. People saw them walking away, but no one dared to intervene. To most, it was easier to look away. But then, the sound of the main door opening cut through the silence like a sudden note in a symphony. A man stepped in, tall and confident, his presence commanding attention without a word. He was dressed in a dark tailored suit, the kind that spoke of quiet authority, not just wealth. His salt and pepper hair glistened under the warm lights, and his eyes scanned the room with the sharpness of someone who missed nothing. Conversations paused, waiters straightened, and even the hostess at the podium froze for just a fraction of a second. Everyone knew who he was. It was Richard Halston, the owner of the restaurant. Richard's reputation was more than just his food. He was known in the city as a man of fairness, someone who had built his restaurant not only on fine dining but on respect. People came not just for the cuisine but because of the way they were treated. His establishment was supposed to be a place where everyone, no matter their background, felt welcome. Tonight, however, he walked into a scene that betrayed the very foundation of his legacy. James and Aaliyah didn't recognize him at first. To them, he was just another patron, maybe someone important given the reaction he stirred. But to the staff, especially the hostess, his arrival was like a storm cloud rolling in. She straightened her blouse quickly, her polished smile snapping back into place, though the nervous flicker in her eyes betrayed her composure. Richard's gaze landed on James and Aaliyah, who were only steps from the door. He noticed the tears in Aaliyah's eyes, the tightness in James's jaw, the way their elegant clothes didn't match the rejection they had just endured. His eyes shifted to the hostess, then to the empty tables behind her, still waiting, still untouched. He didn't need to ask questions. The truth was written across the scene like bold letters on a page. "Good evening," Richard's voice carried across the lobby, calm yet edged with authority. "I couldn't help but notice, where are these guests headed? I trust we're not turning people away on such a busy night without reason." The hostess stammered, her words tripping over one another. "Oh, Mr. Halston. I was just explaining, they don't have a reservation, and we're fully booked tonight." Her tone had shifted drastically, sweetened with fake charm, but her eyes darted nervously as if she knew the excuse wouldn't hold. Richard raised an eyebrow, his gaze steady. "Fully booked?" He looked behind her at the empty tables, the candle waiting to be lit, the plates gleaming untouched. His voice lowered, calm but sharp, the kind of tone that demanded truth. "Strange. Those tables don't look very full to me." The room was silent again. Every guest could feel the tension building, every staff member holding their breath. The hostess opened her mouth, scrambling for a response, but no words came out. James, sensing an unexpected shift, turned to face Richard fully. For the first time that evening, he felt someone was on their side. Aaliyah held tighter to his hand, hope flickering faintly in her chest. Richard stepped closer, his eyes softening as he addressed them directly. "Good evening," he said warmly. "I'm Richard, the owner. And I'd like to apologize personally. This is your night, isn't it? A celebration?" James nodded slowly, still cautious, unsure if this man's kindness was genuine or just another illusion. "Our anniversary," he said quietly. 5 years. Aaliyah's voice trembled as she added, "We had a reservation," but she stopped herself, not wanting to point fingers, though the truth hung heavy in the air. Richard's jaw tightened as he glanced once more at the hostess, who now stood frozen, her polished smile completely gone. Then he turned back to the couple, his voice steady, filled with sincerity. "Well, then, congratulations to both of you. 5 years is something to be honored, not dismissed. And in my restaurant, every guest deserves dignity." He gestured toward the table by the window, the one glowing softly under the overhead light. "Please, allow me to personally seat you. That table is yours tonight." Gasps rippled through the crowd, subtle but noticeable. The guests who had watched silently now looked on with wide eyes, some whispering to one another. The power of the moment was undeniable. A couple once shamed at the door was now being honored by the man who built the very place they had been denied. James and Aaliyah exchanged a glance, hesitation mixed with gratitude. This was not how they imagined their evening, but perhaps this twist was more powerful than anything they had planned. Slowly, they turned back toward the restaurant, following Richard as he led them toward their table. Behind them, the hostess shifted uncomfortably, her face pale, her composure broken. She knew what was coming. And the entire restaurant knew too, this wasn't the end of the story. The real reckoning was only beginning. As James and Aaliyah settled into the table by the window, the weight of humiliation still lingered in the air, though now tempered by relief. Richard had restored their dignity, but his sharp eyes had not left the podium. He had built his restaurant on a reputation of excellence and fairness, and tonight, that foundation had been threatened in front of dozens of witnesses. He wasn't just an owner tonight, he was the guardian of what his establishment stood for. The hostess stood stiffly, her polished smile gone, her face pale under the soft lights. She fidgeted with her name tag, her hands shaking just enough to betray her fear. She knew Richard was not a man who let things slide. He had earned the loyalty of his staff and customers because he believed in accountability. And now, accountability had arrived for her. Richard approached the podium slowly, his footsteps measured, his expression unreadable. The quiet clinking of cutlery from the dining area seemed louder now, like an orchestra waiting for its cue. The entire restaurant was watching, their curiosity barely concealed. Some guests leaned in closer to their tables, pretending to sip from their glasses while their eyes stayed fixed on the unfolding drama. "Miss Parker," Richard said evenly, reading her name from the small silver tag pinned to her blouse. His voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of expectation. "Would you care to explain to me why 2 guests with a reservation were moments away from leaving this restaurant humiliated?" The hostess swallowed hard, her throat dry. I didn't see their reservation, sir," she stammered, her words tumbling clumsily. "The system must not have updated, and I—" Richard raised a hand, silencing her mid-excuse. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in piercing clarity. "Let's not insult anyone's intelligence here," he said, his tone sharper now. "I saw 2 empty tables prepared and waiting. You told them we were fully booked. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." Gasps echoed softly around the room. The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable. The hostess opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Her excuses had evaporated under the heat of truth. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice but making sure every corner of the restaurant could still hear. This establishment was built on respect. Every guest who walks through that door deserves to be treated with dignity, whether they're wearing designer clothes or simple ones, whether they come alone or with family, whether their skin is white, brown, or black. He let the last word linger deliberately, his gaze fixed on her. "Tonight, you chose to ignore that. And worse, you thought no one would hold you accountable." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of admiration and discomfort. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uneasily in their seats. The hostess's face burned crimson, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. I didn't mean," she began, but Richard cut her off firmly. "You did mean it," he said. "Because bias doesn't slip out by accident. It shows itself in moments like this, when you believe no one is watching closely. But make no mistake, Miss Parker, I am always watching. This restaurant represents something larger than food. It represents fairness, kindness, and community. And I will not let anyone, destroy that." The weight of his words silenced the entire room. Even the waiters stood frozen, their trays balanced carefully as they absorbed the moment. Richard turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the guests, making sure they too understood. "Let it be clear, this place is for everyone. Discrimination has no seat at my tables." James and Aaliyah sat quietly at their window seat, their hearts swelling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. For once, someone in authority was not brushing aside what had happened. For once, their voices were not ignored. Richard wasn't just defending them, he was defending the principle that had been trampled when they walked in. The hostess's eyes filled with tears, her confidence crumbling. "Please, sir, I didn't think." "That's exactly the problem," Richard interrupted. "You didn't think. You judged. And that judgment could have ruined what should have been a beautiful night for 2 people celebrating love. That is not the standard of this restaurant, nor is it the standard of humanity." The silence that followed was deafening. The entire restaurant hung on Richard's every word, the truth echoing louder than any applause. Finally, Richard straightened, his tone softening slightly but firm with resolution. "You'll step away from this podium tonight. I will decide tomorrow whether you still have a place here. But understand this, if you work in my house, you serve with dignity. No exceptions." The hostess nodded weakly, her eyes lowered, shame weighing her down like chains. Slowly, she stepped away from the podium, disappearing into the back as whispers rose across the dining room. Guests exchanged glances, some impressed, some shaken, but all of them changed by what they had just witnessed. Richard turned back toward James and Aaliyah, his expression softening as he walked to their table. He placed a hand on the back of James's chair, speaking warmly now. Please forgive what you experienced. Tonight should be about joy, not pain. I promise you, from this moment forward, this evening belongs to you. And with those words, the atmosphere shifted. The weight of injustice lifted, replaced with something new, respect, admiration, and the quiet power of truth spoken aloud.